Hello, my name's Jude. Welcome to the English Country House. On today's episode, we'll be covering everything to do with fruit trees. Here at the English Country House, we're really fortunate that we've got this orchard. We've got roughly 24 trees. They're a mixture of apples, pears, and even within that, we've got a sort of a mixture as well. Today's episode, we're going to be looking in more detail around the maintenance, the pruning, the care of them, because if you look after them, we're talking about being able to provide your family potentially with plenty of fruit, which is great. When it comes to pruning, there are two main points throughout the year that you really should be doing that we've found is a winter prune, which goes without saying. And what you're doing is you're going to be encouraging growth throughout the spring and then obviously in the summer. But it's useful to give these trees a summer pruning as well. And what we're really aiming for is some of the sort of the dead foliage as a starting point. That's always good to start taking off. But you need to be really careful that you don't take too much off. You need to be quite conservative, I think, in terms of how much is taken off. It's really sort of targeting towards the end. So you're just keeping it nice and trim. I love apple trees. There's something just wonderful about them. So what I'm doing is just removing, to start with, the dead foliage. It can sort of encourage blossom and sort of tree growth in general, which is why you don't do this in autumn. And this is why all of the sources advise that it's a winter and summer job. Obviously, here at the English Country House, with the size of the orchard we've got, it's not massive, but it's probably a sort of a full day's job to go through and do it completely properly with the roughly 24 trees or so that we've got. So regarding fertiliser, fruit trees like this typically need an annual sort of top up with something nitrogen based, okay? We've got a bit of a task to do first in terms of clearing some of the growth around the base of the trees. But once we've done that, we'll be starting to apply something like just fish blood and bone, perhaps some chicken manure. Although you've got to be careful with chicken manure. In some cases, it does raise the pH value of the soil. You probably want to spread no more than an inch thick of chicken manure. And then failing that for the rest of the year, just get a load of mulch on there and it should be fine. But ideally, as I said, we're going to clear these bases out. They're a little overgrown at the moment, and then we'll take it from there. So regarding watering, as we all know, England is well renowned, well regarded for its long, hot, dry summers, or rather the week-long summer that we get. It's a good idea to give your trees at least a weekly top-up. Give them a good drenching at the base and a good spraying over the top as well. Try not to cover yourself. Obviously, time of day is important as well. You don't want to be doing it at sort of 12, 1 o'clock. In the rare occasions it does get really hot in England, you're looking to typically do it late in the afternoon, maybe early evening, possibly, very early in the morning as well. But try to avoid the middle of the day when the sun's at its hottest. It's amazingly therapeutic, actually, just being able to water your trees. There's something quite cathartic about it, I find. I think so much of what we do as jobs and careers these days are relatively meaningless. And yet, just growing and tending things, I think, is quite rewarding. Certainly is for me. So, regarding pest care, we took some steps when we moved in winter of last year to ensure that we were sort of doing preparation and taking care of pests, anything that was dormant or wintering, as it were, on the trees themselves. And we used a load of organic type of materials because we were believing that that was the sort of the best way and the approach. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. So we found that early in the spring we had quite a large pest infestation. So we reverted to the more sort of traditional bug killer, if you will. It's not ideal, but we found that it actually did get rid of the bugs that were there. So I think we had a load of black fly. There were a few sort of aphids around. One of the other things we tried was to do the sort of buying the ladybirds. So we had hundreds of ladybirds and lacewing sort of larvae, lacewing fly larvae. They're lovely, but you sort of set them free and they all take off. And it didn't really have any impact on the bug population or the pest population that we had. So we reverted to a more, I wouldn't say traditional, but a more sort of corporate and synthetic approach, if you will. And it has sort of kept them at bay. So they're generally speaking in a good condition. You're probably going to be needing to do some form of pest control over winter. So if you can really prevent any of the build-up over winter whilst they're sort of either their eggs are laid and they're sort of dormant, as it were, then that's probably a good thing to do as well. And maybe a sort of a late spring blast as well. You need to keep an eye out and be going through, certainly here at the English Country House, we need to, because we almost lost a cherry tree. It was actually my mother-in-law who came around and said that cherry tree's infested with black fly. So I had to go through and pretty much prune and spray the living daylights out of it. So yeah, keep an eye on it daily, weekly at the very, very least. And you probably want to go for something a little stronger than I won't mention the names, it's probably not fair, but there's a lot of organic. And if you've got any suggestions or tips for a more organic approach, we would much prefer to do that. We just haven't found any yet that are especially effective. So let us know your thoughts. And just another note on this, as I say, our preference isn't to use this long term, but having tried an organic spray, which, as I said, wasn't especially effective, having tried sort of lacewings and ladybirds that we bought as a natural sort of predation approach, that didn't work. We just noticed that we were going to start to lose some fairly hefty amounts of crop, as it were. So then we sort of went with a more, as I said, corporate synthetic approach, which isn't ideal. A reminder, if you have got anything that works, give us a suggestion. We're all ears. When to harvest? So at the moment, if you saw the last episode with the tiny little potatoes that we managed to harvest, they were delicious, by the way. That's a future episode. At the moment, they're obviously too small. There's a number of tiny ones here. You're probably looking around about early August for most apples. We've got some pear trees, as I said, scattered around here, but certainly for the apples, in terms of actually harvesting it, you're probably looking at early August onwards, and you'll probably get repeat crops. Some of them will mature later, so you'll have some apples at once, and then you'll gradually sort of pick them through the months between then and autumn. So yeah. I can't wait to eat these. That tiny little one I had earlier, whilst quite sour, was delicious. I think there's something wholesome about eating your own sort of fruit that you've grown, even if you know that some of the pest stuff that you've put on it isn't brilliant. But it hasn't been pumped full of chemicals or covered in chemicals. It hasn't been shipped halfway around the planet, so the carbon footprint side of things is obviously good as well. And yeah, I think it's a good thing to be able to do. I once read an article that talked about something like, and again, this is perhaps a talking point, whether or not you agree or not, the average age of an apple in a supermarket can be anything up to a year old, which I'm not quite sure about. And I did an experiment in our old place, actually. Well, it was an unintentional experiment. I took a bite out of an apple. One of my children knocked it onto the floor. And it was a supermarket bought apple, and I thought, oh, and I just threw it outside. At that point, decided to do an experiment. It wasn't deliberate wastage, but I threw it outside, threw it on the floor on the grass in our garden, and there was an apple tree in that front garden, and there were the apples had fallen from the tree. There were numerous ones. Within a week, the apples that had fallen directly from the tree were brown, rotten and mushy. The supermarket apple, the flesh was still white. There was a slight tinge of apple around the bite mark, and there were no insects. Nothing in nature wanted any part of that apple, whilst the apples that had fallen naturally from the tree were, you know, they were completely gobbled alive by all of the insects around it. So of that sort of direct experiment that I did, make of that what you will, I'd say. Hopefully you liked today's content, and if you did, please consider liking, commenting and subscribing. It's all a massive help. Thanks very much.